Hey Optimancers, Chris here. So recently a video was brought to my attention called "Is it suboptimal to build optimized characters in Dungeons and Dragons?" And I have not watched this video yet. I'm just about to, and I figured maybe I would do a reaction to it because this sounds like it's in my wheelhouse. Now this is done by Player Roll, so I will do a link to the video in the video description. So if you want to see the original, please do. So let's get started with this video.
I'm going to do my usual thing and go ahead and start off this video with a disclaimer. This advice, this concept, this discussion does not apply to every single table, and nothing I ever say ever does apply to every single table. And I think generally, for the most part, it's pretty solid advice. But because of the general topic and the title of this video, I know that I'm probably going to make some people mad, and that's okay. Pretty much always, if you try to express an opinion on the internet, you've made someone mad. But
Yeah, okay, so I'll stop it right there because I generally agree. Whatever we say on these channels doesn't apply to everybody. And I mean, the title of this video is obviously intended to get a reaction. Is it suboptimal to build optimized characters in Dungeons and Dragons? That seems like an impossible claim to me to justify because I mean, if it's optimal, it's optimal. If it's suboptimal, it's suboptimal. I don't know how one becomes the other, but I'll be interested to see what he has to say. He says it's good advice.
still, nonetheless, I did want to put that disclaimer out there. But with that being said, I want to talk about the fact that min-maxing can actually make your character feel less powerful. So let's talk about that. Now, what do I mean when I say it makes your character feel less powerful? How can you min-maxing your numbers to be the best possibly make your character feel less powerful than an unoptimized character? After all, it's hard to argue. A fighter that can deal 3d10 a round plus its modifiers is just generally going to do better than somebody who only deals, I don't know, a few d6 and doesn't have a maxed out modifier. A wizard with the absolutely best spells is going to outdamage a wizard with suboptimal spells. There's no getting around the fact that min-maxing.
Oh, okay. So there's his first thing he said that I actively disagree with, and that is that a wizard with the best spells is going to outdamage a character without the best spells. The best wizard spells don't do damage. The best wizard spells actually facilitate other players or other player characters, to be more precise. So, if you look at the best spells for wizards in the game, things like web, things like fear, things like hypnotic pattern, spells like force cage, these spells don't do damage. They do zero damage. And what you do when you're a wizard and you cast a web spell is the point is to make the other players more powerful, right? So that the enemy is now restrained, so they're going to have disadvantage to attack you and your allies, and your allies will have advantage to attack those enemies. So what we're really doing with an optimized wizard is we're making the other player characters more powerful. But that's just the first thing he said that I disagree with. I mean, you can do damage with the wizard. I just don't think if we're really optimizing a wizard, that's not really what we're doing.
Does mechanically make your character more powerful. But that being said, it can go a long way to making your character feel less powerful, and there's a very specific reason that I'm saying that. And what is that reason? Well, it just gives your DM less to work with, less flexibility, less room. They have to be on top of making sure that they have your character handled. And that can really go a long way to making it feel like you have less options and are not as powerful as you truly are. Now, I'm not just speaking out my butt here. I do have an example for this. In the first campaign I ever ran, we had quite a few players, and some of the players really liked min-maxing. And let me make it 100% clear, I am not downplaying or putting down anybody who likes to min-max. I personally have min-maxed quite a few times. I find it very fun. You're not wrong for trying to build a powerful character. At the end of the day, D&D is a role-playing and a war game. War game is part of that, and combat is a very core part of the mechanics. Knowing combat and doing it right isn't wrong. Nobody should put you down for that, so long as you're not putting other people down for it. However, when you do min-max, it can really tie the DM's hands. In that first campaign that I ran, those players who really liked to min-max were very powerful, and because it was the first campaign I ever ran, I gave them some magic items that were a little too much. This caused me to have to be really restrictive on what they wanted to do. When they wanted to try and get creative with their spells.
So I just want to pause for a moment there. So This is just a common pitfall for newer DMs, is that when you're giving out magic items, you really need to know what they do and what impact they're going to have on the game. That doesn't mean you don't give players magic items that are powerful, but it does mean that when you do so, you should already know what those items do and have an idea on how they are going to affect your game. Just be careful of that. So that's just a good piece of advice if you're a newer DM. Just be very careful about giving out magic items. If you don't know what it does, you probably shouldn't give it out until you find out. And if it does something unusual, you need to think about it for a bit. Because, if a sword deals an additional 2d6 damage when you hit with it, that might not sound that great, but you got to think about how players might be able to use that if they can get enough attacks together. That these kinds of things can add up. And so you have to think about it. And the most important thing is that's not a case of players min-maxing. If the DM gives you a powerful magic item, that's not players min-maxing. That is the DM choosing to give you an item that is really powerful. But let's move on.
I usually had to put some pretty fast and harsh rules to stop them from doing that. Something I thought was really cool and that I would love for them to do, but if they did it, it would just be too much. It would make them far too powerful and the other players at the table would feel useless. It's all about balance. You can't just always tell them no because it'll be effective. You want your players to be effective, but at the exact same time, you want all the players at the table to feel capable, and if a few of them are outshining all the rest all the time, it's no longer fun for them. However,
And I agree with him there. If you have a power imbalance on the table and there's characters that are just being outshined, there is a good chance that player is having less fun. So that is a pitfall, a potential pitfall of optimization, is that the goal should never be to be more powerful than the other players. That isn't really optimization. That is what I would call power gaming, when you are kind of playing and your opponent isn't actually the challenge. Your opponent ends up being the other characters. You want to be more powerful than they are. When you are focusing on the challenges as a team, that's when optimization comes into play, and that is when teamwork comes into play. And when teamwork comes into play, it does help balance out those imbalances that can sometimes happen when somebody knows the rules and is able to build a mechanically stronger character than somebody else. Like I said, the wizard casting web is making that other character more powerful. And it actually can help make them feel like there's less of an imbalance.
meanwhile, I also had a fighter. And the fighter was not super well versed in the rules. She wasn't min-maxed, she didn't have the best stats, she was good, don't get me wrong, character-wise, but the player didn't have quite a grasp of combat that the others did. Because of this, there were quite a few times where she would try to break the rules of combat. She'd try to do something unique or interesting or creative rather than just the number crunching way that you should do it. And because she was already a suboptimal character, I had the flexibility to allow her to, because it didn't make everybody else at the table feel like they were weaker, it just made her character feel more capable. And really, at the end of the day, the core...
Okay, so I realize I'm stopping this video a lot, but what he's saying here is, and I just want to break it down, is that he had a player who made an unoptimized character who wanted to do creative things instead of, I assume, their standard, not very effective things they could do. So they came up with creative ideas, and he, as a DM, felt he should facilitate that to help make her feel effective. But there's no reason why that can't happen with somebody who has an effective character. If my character normally does 5 points of damage on a round, and I want to do something creative because doing 5 points of damage just feels bad, the DM can, of course, facilitate that. But if I'm a character that does 50 points of damage around, and I come up with something else to do on my turn that is creative and fun and interesting, instead of doing 50 points of damage, I don't see why a DM wouldn't facilitate that. That doesn't make any sense. I would think, in fact, a DM might even be more inclined to have somebody who had something else really effective they could do something more creative and interesting. Because, if that 50 points of damage around is becoming difficult for you to handle, and that player is willing to come in with other ideas on things they can do with their turn, that's maybe not such a bad thing.
core of this video that I'm trying to get at is that if you min-max your character, you're going to be more powerful. but it prevents the DM from allowing you to be super creative so that you don't outshine everybody else at the
Again,
table.
don't agree
when
with
you're
that.
not as strong as a character, when you're not 100% all the time, 100% consistent with your damage and killing everything, when you want to do something creative or fun, it's a lot easier for the DM to allow that. And again, this is not a universal constant. This isn't every single game.
If your
but
players want to do
it
something
has been a
creative or fun,
100%
just let
universal
them.
constant in every game that I've played in. And look, if you actually think about it, it makes a lot of sense. A DM's job is to keep balance at the table, to keep the story moving forward and keep the players having fun. And if you're going to keep the players having fun, they all have to feel like they're effective. They don't have to feel effective in the same way, but they do have to feel capable. And if one player at the table is trying to min-max so specifically to be better than everybody else, that's fine. It is fine to try and make your...
No, that's not fine. And that's not optimization. If you are a player and you are trying to be more powerful than the other players' characters, and that's your goal, that's not fine, and it's not optimization. That's just power gaming. That's not what optimization is about. But I mean, it can happen unintentionally, right? If you make a character and you're a fighter and you use careful min-maxing techniques and make a powerful, effective fighter, and then somebody else makes a fighter that isn't, it can lead to overshadowing it. But the intent is important, right? If your intention was to overshadow that other player, I don't think you've done something. I think you've done something that isn't okay. It's not okay at my table. It's not okay at anybody's table. That is just a personality flaw. If you are making a character that's powerful because you like making powerful characters and unintentionally you've ended up overshadowing somebody else, well, that can happen. And yes, the DM can play a role in smoothing that out.
character really good at a specific thing. If there's a fighter at the table, they're probably going to be the best at combat for the most part. Eventually magic casters may overtake them, but even then if they're min-maxing, they'll continue to be extremely effective. You shouldn't take that away from them. But say that they're so specifically good at combat that when another player tries to do something creative, like use a spell in a creative way, in order to be able to assist with that, you let them. But when the fighter wants to do the same thing so they can be just as effective as, say, the spellcasters in utility, that's when you start to give pause. It's not necessarily the easiest thing when somebody is so specifically min-maxed to be the best at everything that you give them the flexibility to be as creative as everybody else. We want people to...
I mean, creativity is more than just, I'm not good at this, so let me bypass the rules, right? The idea is that you are immersed in a game and then you think of something your character does that isn't necessarily covered in the rules. And then you ask your DM, and your DM can facilitate that if they think it's, appropriate to the story, if they think it's appropriate, in the world, if it's possible to do, and if they think it'd be cool and fun. But there's no reason why a fighter that's really good at combat, where you're not in combat, and they come up with some cool, interesting, creative idea of something they could do out of combat that might even the score with people who are good at that kind of thing. I don't see why a DM would say no. That doesn't make any sense to me.
To be creative, absolutely. We want them to be creative within the bounds of the characters that you've created. This is a team-based game. Every player in a team should have their place. If one person can do everything, what's the point in having a team? At that point, why even play D&D? After all, the Justice League is amazing, yes, but Superman can do everything. That's why a lot of people consider him a boring character. Did they fix that and start to work more on it in the later years? Yeah, absolutely. In modern times, Superman is powerful, don't get me wrong, but he's a part of the group. They all need each other. In the past, Superman was just the best and everybody else was just there. They were there to act as a power test how powerful Superman was. That's not exciting. It wasn't fun, and Superman, rightfully, got blamed for being a boring character. It's the same with D&D characters. So when you create an optimized character, that's great, awesome, wonderful, but understand that you're optimized in that field. Don't try and overstep your bounds. And if you want to be able to be creative and also...
If there is a way to optimize a character so that you're as good as an entire party, I don't know what it is, and I've never heard of it. Generally speaking, optimization is about working with your team, right? Like, you want to make the most use out of the resources you have, and those resources include the other team members. And if you ignore those other team members and you're not optimizing around them, then that's poor optimization. And as far as I know, there's no way to make Superman in D&D or his equivalent. But the most powerful characters are the ones that work well with other party members. And you know, I've never seen the I don't need any other party members character using any of the standard rule interactions that I'm aware of. Um, I mean, maybe there's taking advantage of loopholes or that kind of thing, if we're talking about theoretical stuff. But the stuff that actually sees gameplay at tables, I am not sure I see much in it. Like, this seems to be kind of a fictional account. When I see optimized characters come to the same table as unoptimized characters, it's not that the optimized characters can do everything. That's tends not to be what I see.
All sorts of other fields, don't make yourself the absolute best. In one of the campaigns I played in, I played an artificer who was pretty optimized for combat. I specifically went out of my way to try and give some backstory reasons of why he wouldn't always use everything he had, but he was very good at combat. And so when the other players at the table tried to do creative things, the DM would often let them. When I asked to do creative things, he would give a little bit of pause. He worked with me, but the creative plans I had were never as effective as everybody else's. Was I offended by that? No, because at the end of the day, I could just pull out my weapon and fire, and I would do probably more damage than everybody else there. And I did, many times, because that's what I was good at. It's not fun to have somebody constantly take the spotlight. So if you want to be able to be creative and do lots of things, it can sometimes be optimal to not build your character optimally. I know it sounds weird, but it does give your DM a lot of ability and a lot of creativity to do what you want to do. Now again, I will emphasize, is this for every table? No, 100% no. That's just not the fact of the matter. Not everybody will operate this way. But every table I've been in, this has been a universal factor, and I'm willing to bet it's more common than you think, even if the DM is only doing this subconsciously. So work with your DM and talk about that, and consider the fact that if you want to min-max, that's awesome. That is part of the game, and I enjoy doing it too, but lean into your min-maxing. Don't try and step on everybody else's toes. If you want to be able to step outside that to experience some other things, well, at that point, maybe you should consider building suboptimal. Anyways, hope you enjoyed. Go out into the world, make it your own. Don't forget to have a great day, and never forget the player role. Thank you. Come again.
All right. So, yeah, the first thing I want to say is Play Your Role was the channel that did this video. They're linked in the video description. When we're looking at somebody else's video, I think it's the right thing to do, if you can, to go check out their video, maybe give them a thumbs up as a way to appreciate them making the content that I'm essentially borrowing here. But I do want to kind of push back against, I think, what I'm getting the advice here. It seems to me the advice is if you play a less powerful character, or you deliberately make a less powerful character, then the DM is going to let you do more creative things, and therefore you'll be more powerful in that regard. Now, first off, I'd say I'm not sure I agree with the idea that means that you make an unoptimized character to be more optimal, because if being optimal is manipulating your DM into giving you more goodies, then that's what's optimal, right? Mechanical min-maxing and being optimal aren't always in alignment. And if your intention is to manipulate your DM or coerce your DM or trick your DM into giving you extra goodies or extra opportunities to do things outside of the rules, then technically that would be optimization. But to push back, I would say that I don't think that's the way it operates. I think if you are playing an optimal character and you go to your DM and you want to do something different than your standard optimal thing that you're doing every round, and you have something creative you want to try, and it's cool and it's going to be fun and it's going to be interesting for the table, I don't think the DM is going to respond by thinking, because your character is good, I'm not going to let you do that. Maybe there are DMs that will work that way, but I think in general, I think DMs want to have fun and they want the players to have fun, and that doesn't seem to be the way to do it. So I'm not sure I agree with the premise of the video. I appreciate the content, but I don't think that I agree with the claim in the end. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on it. So let me know yours in the comments down below. Otherwise, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D's for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.